I'd like to introduce the two junior fellows we have up here to help us with the discussion. This is Lola Ajao, is that correctly pronounced? She's a Nigerian-Canadian documentary filmmaker, playwright. Her films are largely revolve around the priority of creating and documenting Black livelihood. Her work has screened internationally, and recently winning a Canadian Screen Award, supported by the Toronto and Ontario Arts Councils and the Canada Council. And I was really impressed with Lola's short YYZ, creatively telling the story of her family's arrival at Toronto Airport. And we have James. James Bird's a member of the Dene Suline Nation. I hope I pronounced that. Okay, affiliated with the Northwest Territories Métis Nation. James holds an MA in architecture and is transitioning to a PhD in architecture here at U of T. His current work examines the intersection between Indigenous languages and shape forming using parametrics and algorithms. He's a member of the Royal Architectural Institute of Canada's Indigenous Task Force on Architecture. And James was a member of the Canadian team that won the 2018 Venice Architectural Biennale. So, here we are. I'll ask the first question of Alanis, and then you two, chime in, and then any questions or comments or whatever from you. I mean, my God, I feel exhausted. I'm not sure how you feel. Have you watched this film of late? I mean, how does it feel, Alanis?
Well, I feel very sad because a lot of those people have passed away. At least more than 25 of them, warriors, people, leaders, and traditional people, chiefs. It's just people go and you can still see them. But I find it very difficult because I know what they went through and how devoted they were, and how much they believe in fighting for the land. And the reason, excuse me, the reason it didn't turn very bad at the end, this is not whiskey.
Later.
It's because of the traditional people that were part of it. They really worked on the warriors and spiritually, and really talking to them and really identifying why they were there. And it was, you could see the difference, you could feel it in the air at the end. The anger was gone. It was the reason why they were there all of a sudden had much stronger value in terms of what they felt in their heart. And at first there was a lot of anger and fighting between the army and the warriors. We were always afraid one would shoot one, and that would be the end. So it was always a worry time. But the reason why it ended, no killing, they burned their guns before going out also. So I learned a lot about what is it that you fight for, what do you stand for, what's in your heart, what life, like the respect for life. I was very, very touched and impressed by the traditional leaders who really, it was through them that it ended that way.
It comes through, and it's in your film. It's a remarkable document, of course, for all time. News crews come and go, but you stayed through it all and spent years, I know, constructing editing all that for you, what you had a lot of footage to comb through and sort and organize and tell the story.
But you know, at that time it was very difficult in Canada. Very difficult to be an Indigenous person in Canada, all over Canada. And it was the first time that there was such resistance and really at the front. And I think that many people saw and felt things they just never imagined that they would. And from that time, every community, every reserve has had this kind of problem where land is taken, where either the government decides, the church, every control from all sides. They had this same kind of happening where land was taken and cheated, and it's terrible stories everywhere. But this was the first time that there was such resistance. So the Mohawks, in reality, by the fact that they did this resistance and this gesture, it changed for all the communities in the country. It gave them strength and not be afraid, and that you will stand for your rights, you will stand for your land, and generation after generation, it gets better. Look at where we are now. Look at today, a couple of days ago, just the 30th of September. Think of all the change and all the caring that Canadians in general are curious, want to know, and we have a better place. There is respect that I've never seen before. In the early 60s, I was going around singing, talking to people at the university level, every grade, from kindergarten to adults. And someone said to me one day, did you know that 68%, this isn't the 60s, 68% of the people in jail are Indigenous? And I said, oh my God, my relations are in jail, I'm going to go visit them. And I start touring in a lot of prisons, and I start sitting in court, especially in the prairies. I would sit, I couldn't believe it, I'd sit in a courtroom, and you'd have maybe 50 men lined up, and some women, and somebody would say, blah, 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 you're guilty of this, so many days in jail, and you have to pay a fine, and one after the other. And all these men, their heads down, and no say, no word, zero, nothing, no respect. It was horrifying. I lived a long time. I'm 89 years old. And these last 8 films I made has to do with court, with laws, with everything that people have gone through. And for me, after that, what I just told you, what I witnessed in the courtroom, to be in the courtroom making these films, being allowed to do all the shoots that I wanted to, watching our people in court being treated like human beings, being respected, having a word. Even at times, this was the human rights court, at times there were ceremonies, people, I said, oh my God, if I drop dead tomorrow, I don't have to worry so much anymore, because it is a different time. And I'm not saying that everything is right and perfect, no, but there's a lot of things that are. And it's a different time, and I want all Canadians to know that we feel it, we know it, and everything is possible now. Young people like you, there's a place. You will be received, you will be respected, you will be encouraged. And this is new for us, I would say in the last 5-10 years. More in the last 5 years. So I want you people to know that we are aware and we are going someplace much better than where we were before. I want you to know that.
Well, you documented a turning point, I think, in the relationship relationship between Indigenous people and the rest of Canada. Lola, do you have some comments or some question you'd like to ask or anything you'd like to say?
Yes, absolutely. Like, I love the work, and I think as well, documenting the turning point, you also was a catalyst in turning us to think a lot about the Indigenous experience within Canada. There is a certain sense of intimacy within your work. If you could talk maybe about the process of ensuring Indigenous people are comfortable to tell their story, to ensure that their voice is heard, that would...
It's happening like crazy. You know, everywhere I go in Canada, young people, they all want to make videos. And it's wonderful because they can be very helpful in terms of education in their own communities, to be concerned and to, you know, like the biggest crime this country has done to our people is the kind of education that they settle in the classroom for many generations, teaching all the people here, designed to make sure that everybody's going to hate us like hell, and they succeeded. When you open a book to teach the history of the country, and you start saying these savages, they went around scalping the poor white people, and they're morons, and they don't have any religion. I sat in the classroom hearing this about my own people, and I knew I was going to get beat up that day. Anytime they read about the history, that's what happened. And now, at least, these books are out. I think there's still a lot of work to be done concerning the educational system, but it's getting better. It's getting possible where our own people can be teachers, where our own history can be told. What our language, if we spoke our language, we got punished. Now there is encouragement. That's what I'm talking about. That is the difference. At the community level, many of the people who have a school, a day school at the community level, are teaching the language. The language is lost in with many nations because they made you feel that, first of all, you're not allowed to speak that language. You were beat up for it. And second, it was Satan's language. I heard this all my young life, that my language was Satan's language. So when you hear this, generation after the other, you start believing it. You look in the mirror, you don't like what you see. Oh, yeah. Oh, you're dirty, you're not white, you're ugly. You know, you start feeling these things that they say that you are. And it's very dangerous. So we're in a different time now. And I really believe that Canadians in general are very curious. Many people say, oh my God, we never knew this. And it's interesting, I'd like to know more about your people. There's curiosity. And there's also, there are good people everywhere. I want all of you to know that. I know that. Believe you me, I learned that there were always good people everywhere. So that's where we're going. I want our people to think, to know how beautiful they are. Until I die, I'm going to tell them. They're beautiful, they don't know it. And they're capable and they're wonderful. Our people are beautiful. And they have a lot to say, and they have an incredible history in this country. The language is fantastic. The language in all the nations, there are things that are similar. You say, oh, I wonder how they went about to create this language. I mean, you speak English? Well, I speak Abenaki. You speak your language. How it is built, how the language is thought, what is the root of an indigenous language? It's incredible what you can learn just by knowing what's important, you live with nature, animals, and the people are one. All that lives, the respect for water. And in our case now, we have still many communities don't have clean water to drink. So, you know, we have to still do a lot of work. But the respect for life, everything that has life, And this is how you know, previously, people, you know, the nation that I come from, when I was a young girl, all the guys, they would go in the fall to be guides for hunting and fishing for people that were rich and would hire the Indians. And I can still see my father and other people, they always had a cup hanging on your belt. And it was made out of a knot in a wood, beautiful. They all had carved design on it, often symbolizing a clan that you belong to, mainly animals and birds. And because you have the respect for water, clean water, you would not mistreat water or not use it in an abusing way. And you would take your cup, and from the river you would take water in a cup to drink. We won't see this anymore. But I remember as a young girl, it was so important to do how you are raised in a particular nation. What are the symbols? What is the language? How you treat animals? How you treat people? Every animal has its own history. There's a song for each animal. When you have to kill an animal, you're supposed to sing for this animal and respect it and explain why, and then use every piece of that animal to respect, not to just throw out what you don't want or what you don't feel you need. It was like they said we had no religion. Like, if you want to call that a religion, you know this film? We made a Mohawk version last year. I am telling you, there was 3 people who worked on it from KANEHSATAKE. If this is, I cannot tell you how beautiful it was, the experience. And one of the person who did the man's translation, he had 3 children. I think he might have been in his 40s. I was watching him talking Mohawk to his children. And since this, it has created a lot of change for a lot of people in the country. But for the Mohawks, they started a special center for language. They had teachers at the time. They told me the teacher were like 80 years old teaching the language. And now you have a lot of young people who are speaking the language fluently. And what you saw tonight has really brought a lot of strength to the people themselves of the community. Not that they were all in accord, that they didn't all think the same way. There were different groups. But when you hear this, not only did they learn their language, a lot of young people who didn't speak it, but also what carries that, the symbols, the traditions. So the land issue is still not resolved. But what happened then, when this was over, many people put up their house for sale. They didn't want to live there anymore. And they felt that the value of their house went down. So they asked the government to buy quite a few of these houses. Indian Affairs, the federal government, bought all those houses that were for sale, transferred it to the Mohawks, that was used for community whatever. That was done. But the actual land, like the traditional people said, you should never say land claim. What do you mean land claim? You're claiming this is your land? You should say land rights, because it is your rights and it belongs to you. So there's a whole system and language that our leaders teach us, and we learned so much from it. And when this film came out, well, I tell you, I didn't get killed, but I was not welcome in a lot of places. And the same type of people of that time today tell me, oh, we're so happy you did those films. The same people who criticize me talk to me differently now. So I see changes everywhere.
Hesitate to cut off Alanis Obomsawin, but we like to give James an opportunity. It's nice to hear your optimism. It's good to hear your optimism about the future. Yeah, James.
Thank you very much. It's incredible to be amongst you two filmmakers, 50-year career. And as an Indigenous person, that film is really both disturbing but very important. And I think it's important that immigrants see that film, actually. A lot of people come to this country as a safe haven. Canada is known as a safe haven. Everybody comes here for that safety. So it's important to see the issues that this country still faces. I suffered through the day school, residential school system as well. And as horrific as all that I seen in the film and all that I went through, I today remain in hope. And that's where my heart is. It has to. I think to myself, and when I talk to chiefs back home, we're left with, what is the alternative? Really, what is the alternative? It's hope for me. So I often say, I like the word hope better than optimism. For me, optimism somehow thinks I know what's going to happen. Hope, I don't. Hope is more, there's more to it, and there's a term for it in the language. It was disturbing, all of it was. That film really, I was really uneased by the whole thing. And I mean, the fight for land continues. We are 30 years later in a much better place. When Phil Fontaine started the whole TRC movement, and that changed things as well. And then this summer with the finding of bodies, that changed the psyche of the country. Now it was very real. And one of the reasons is that everybody can relate to children, and the fact that these bodies were being discovered. Hundreds of a time, and now it's up to thousands. I think it's up to 6,000. So I too am optimistic, I'm hopeful, I'm glad we are where we are today, 30 years later. I too was, ashamed for speaking my language. I remember the nuns putting a wooden clothespin on my tongue for speaking the language in day school, residential school. We're not there today. We're not. And so, documentary films in this country are so important, and the work that you both do is in an inspiring. I'm an architect, but I try and do my thing through architecture, letting language have its say through built form. But documentary films are powerful. They're so powerful. They tell incredible stories. They're so real. There's no acting. I mean, it's such a powerful thing to watch. I, at the end, was really uncomfortable. I was hoping this would end soon. But that's the discomfort we all must face as Canadians. All come to terms with this. So I just thank you for your 50 years plus in filmmaking. You've done probably 100 films, is that right? Over 100 films? 54. But all the different
She's not
projects
done
you
yet.
have been involved in, both you and Peter. So thank you for all your work, your lifetime work. Massey chol, so zay machi.
Anyone wish to speak or make a comment or ask a question? Just,
Nice to hear from people in the audience.
Yeah, let's hear from folks out there. Please, don't be shy.
To break the ice, so people I'm sure have less to say. First of all, Madame Obomsawin, it's so wonderful to have you here, and I think to be talking about the movie with us, I think it's a great privilege that we have, and I think we want to thank you and recognize this. One of the questions that was asked is we feel that people talk to you in that movie, and the testimony is with the visuals, but also with your voice narrating it. Was that difficult to decide that you would be the narrator? or was that actually because they had confidence in you and confidence in your voice telling the story?
I'm the narrator, I know I'm dead.
Use the microphone. Please. Not just for the room, but people beyond the room.
Ah, okay. No, I narrate. I'm a storyteller, and I'm with the people, and I interview people a lot, just sound to begin with. So I always feel very close to people that are going to be in the stories that we tell. And I spent a long time, even this film I could not do like I usually do. I usually go and interview people just sound until I feel I know the story. So this is like they call it guerrilla filmmaking. You have to film as it happens, and it's it's pretty dangerous all the time. So, but what I did after the 78 days, I stayed an extra 2 weeks, going to hear people that I knew were going to be in the film. In other words, what I usually do at the beginning, I did at the end, to make sure that they were at ease.
And you've kept in touch with some of these people over the years.
Yes, over the years. I made also 3 other films. There's a coffret with 4 films of this, and there's a book in it too. So it was a long process to be with them and continue for several years to make the other films, and really wanting to know how they were doing. And it's just it was difficult also for all those people who took part in this resistance for a period of time after. It was very
Do you know
hard.
if any of those people in the military have returned to Oka to, I don't know if the word apologize is accurate, but to talk to them, no? Has there been
I don't
anything
think
like
so.
that?
No. Not that I know of. It was very tough for quite a long time. It was against the Mohawk. That's for sure. So it was interesting because they went to court. There was a court case that went on for several months, and I attended as much as I could, but I missed some really good shows too. Because one time, apparently there was one soldier, I think it might have been Tremblay, but I'm not sure, he had all the guns that was used for this resistance and on both sides. And he would explain each guns, what they were. And apparently, I wasn't there that day. And another one that I missed was this one soldier said that these Mohawks, they put, when you send a bad curse. Yes. And that there was somebody, this woman, apparently she cursed him, and since then he was vomiting. And he vomited in court. But I missed that day, I wasn't there. God, it was just unbelievable, this stuff. And then, you see, they had ceremonies while they were there, beautiful traditional ceremonies. And they had some masks that were very precious and very sacred that people brought to them to do these ceremonies. And when they went out, and some of them were holding on to the mask, the army confiscated the mask. And then apparently, and the Mohawks was trying to get the mask back, but it took quite a while, and at one point, it was transferred to the police, and then they called on the Mohawks for them to come and get their mask. And some of the leaders, they said, no rush. The mask can take care of itself. People really... And now they were begging them, come and get these. They were so...
We have a question. Excuse me. We have a question.
Alanis, just a technical question. How big was your crew on the other side of the barbed wire? Because it seemed like there must have been a crew of, what, 80 or 90, but probably not. And then at the end, were you just allowed to walk out and walk away?
Nothing easy like that. No, I had two crews. I had one crew at night and one crew in the day, outside. When I went back into the perimeter there, we were only allowed 2 people. So I took the Niagara from the sound person, and I said, you get yourself another sound Niagara from the film board, and I'm taking your Niagara, I'll do the sound inside. And one camera person. And the first camera person didn't stay, it stayed about 2-3 days. And then I had another one, also 2 or 3 days, and that's it. And at the end, the last cameraman said, I'm leaving, there's going to be, everybody was scared there was going to be a shootout. So he said, I'm leaving, I'm not staying here to get shot at. So now and I wasn't allowed to change anymore, so I was alone. And that's when Roger Rocha, who was one of the cameramen, passed me a video camera. He hid it with some food that he was bringing. And I had never worked with a video camera. I thought, oh, I didn't have that much, I didn't think it would be quality. So if I was filming something, you know, there's a sound that comes on with the camera, with the image. But I was also taping myself with the Niagara, the 1/4-inch tape, like we do for 16, every time. So I had a bunch of tapes, 1/4-inch tape, and I had these videotapes. So while I had 2 crews outside, I was alone in there. From maybe when Spud Ranch got beat up, I was alone, and. So all the shooting that you see got less quality. For instance, like when the army transferred Tremblay to the bottom and he's putting barbed wire in the water, like a cuckoo. So I'm the one that filmed all those things. You can tell it's less quality, but it's still very important because it documents something very important. So you have... it's not the same quality as 16.
And I read somewhere that at the end you were running out of tape, and you were running the tape at a slower speed to preserve. Is this an accurate story? Okay. A lot of stories from the filmmaking trenches. Not all accurate. Who else has a question? Right there.
Alanis, one of the things that came through very strongly for me, aside from the courage and resolution of the Mohawks and their allies behind the wire, was it's a tremendous story of incompetence on the part of the various forces on the other side. One day it's the Sûreté de Quebec, one day it's the armed forces. They are bumping into federal jurisdiction, provincial jurisdiction. One day they're laying barbed wire in the water, the next day they're bayoneting food. And the 2 things I take from that are, first of all, that incompetence made the situation much more dangerous because the idea that someone would start firing on the non-Mohawk side was probably all the greater because of the lack of discipline. But also their response, it must have been just that they were astonished that people were standing up to them, and that they weren't used to that, and they didn't know how to respond to it. Did you get a sense that they basically were they didn't know how to deal with the whole situation, and they were basically screwing it up continuously?
The army and the police, you mean?
Yes.
Yeah. They just had no clue. That's very, very obvious. At that time, we're talking 1990, that's 30 years ago now, the respect for Indigenous people didn't exist very much. You know, that's a fact. And so in Quebec, there's another side also that you have the French people that is always in problems with English, So the Indigenous people are at the bottom of the line. But as I said before, it's changing now. But at that time, forget it. It was very, they were treated like stupid and useless, that they didn't make sense, and all those things. So, and the mayor of Oka was unbelievable what he thought of those people. It was very obvious.
Well, and the danger, I think, was at the time in terms of people's perception of those Mohawk people, the Indigenous people, was very negative in the media, in the press, in the general populace.
Yeah.
You hear Mulrooney being interviewed and others. That's what I think. That's why I think your film is so valuable, because it really does help, as I said earlier, move the needle in terms of what Canadians, what anyone who's seen this film,
Yeah.
feels about those people.
Yeah, and the warriors themselves, they were there prepared to die, because many people thought not many people is going to come out of there alive, including ourselves. They're not going to choose, hey, this one's making a film, we're not going to shoot her. I would have been in the pot too, So it was awful. I felt bad because there were some very young children there, and I thought, my God, if something happens to their parents, there was a baby that was 18 months old. At least my daughter was 20 years old or so, and I was worried that if I'm dead or if I come out of there paralyzed or whatever, you think you cannot not help but think that this is possible.
The film board told you to leave, right? I mean, people.
Oh yeah, they were trying to make me leave every weekend.
Right.
But I wasn't going to leave, so I left when the traditional chief told me they were leaving in a couple of days. I said, well, I'm leaving before you, because otherwise they would confiscate all my tapes. So, and I was right. And so I left they left on the 26th, I left on the 24th, I think. And you should have seen me. The film board had tried to make me leave many times. And I said, I'm not leaving without a lawyer and the director of my studio. So that was a big problem. It was Madame McDonald, who was the minister for a period of time.
Flora.
And so they said, well, she has to leave, and we can't have a lawyer because the federal and the army have the same lawyers, because it's yeah.
It's an agency of the government of Canada, the National Film.
So I said, well, I don't care. I want a lawyer, and not one of those lawyers. So finally, they found a lawyer who used to be a lawyer for the army and was now on his own, I guess. And they said, and he knows all the ins and outs, and he's taking the case. So he came one day on the 24th when I was leaving, and with the director, and it was raining softly. And the song that you hear, the chant you hear at the end, when they're coming out and they're all handcuffed and the legs. When I was leaving on the 24th, I had my Niagara, and I was always taping. And this guy, for the Mi'kmaq from Eskasoni, they called him the general. He's the one that talks at the end. He says to me, "You're leaving?" I said, "Yes, I'm leaving because you're leaving." And I said, I have to protect my material. He said, "You know, when I'm coming out, I'm going to sing my chant, my winning chant." So I said to him, "You're Mi'kmaq. The Mohawks are going to sing theirs, and we won't hear you." I said, "Why don't you sing it for me? And I'll have it if I want to use it in the film."
Good for you, Alanis.
So we're standing by a tree, and I've got the Niagara on. He began to sing, and then bang, a helicopter comes by, making lots of sound, and I'm making a sign to it, continue. And he was trying to sing louder. So I said, "Do it again." He does it again. The helicopter comes again 3 times. So I said, "That's okay. I'm glad we have the chant." So when the time came, unfortunately, he had passed away then, when the film came out. I said to the music editor, I want the song of the chant when they come out, because you see him, he comes out and he's got his feet chained, and so everything is fine. He comes back from the editing room, and he had cut the helicopter sound. He says, "This is terrible. The helicopter is ruining." I said, "No, I want it exactly like it was. I want to hear the helicopter. I want people who's going to listen to this chant. They will know what it was like." And he thought I was nuts. And then he went back to the cutting room, and he came back, and every time I hear it, I just get a lump in my throat, because I think of this man. And even the sound editor, he told me, "Alanis, you were right." But it's all those things when you're working on a story. They're all the little things that makes the difference. How close you are to your subject, to people, and things like that.
One of the incredible images you captured, I thought, that was really ridiculous, was the army with the eggs.
Oh.
They were all worried about these eggs.
Did you recognize my voice?
Yeah, I did. Yes, I thought that was you captured that really ridiculous moment with the army fighting over eggs.
Yeah, it went for eggs. He says, "Give me your camera, and I'll take a picture." Yeah.
Who has a question or a comment or an observation? Yes, this lady here in the striped top.
Hi there. I don't have a question. I just have thanks. I teach your films repeatedly, and I am thanking you for every single student that has ever seen your films in my classes. And thank you from the bottom of my heart, because you have taught me and my students so much over the years.
This is, for me, education is the main important thing in my life. Very long time ago I was a child, and it was pretty horrible. And I try to make it better for other children.
Alanis was on Sesame Street singing to children. It's an educational program.
Yes, telling story and singing for children. I love doing it. Every minute of it.
Questions, comments, suggestions? Natalie, yeah. Oh, there's one gentleman here. Maybe we can make that the last one.
Thank you for being here. I interviewed you many years ago when your album was reissued, and not many people know that Alanis put out this incredible record in 1988. That's one of the most beautiful things I've ever heard. And at that point, I asked you, I said, "You've spent your lifetime telling other people's stories so beautifully, and when do we get to hear yours?" And at that point you said, "Actually, this fall, I'm starting to write it down." And I just want to know...
How many years ago was that?
When did that come out? 2017, 18? I can't remember when that was reissued.
This is another fall this time.
But I think, the stories we've heard tonight and the stories you told me about performing for children in residential schools. Oh, yeah. You told me that you played like 64 schools in 1 month or something like that.
We did 64 concerts in 1 month, a family and myself. There was 11 of us. And we did a lot of residential school at that time. This is in the 60s. And it was just the story about the graveyards. It's almost every residential school. In those days, they told us. I remember when I was working for another film in Alberta, Spud Ranch. no. There was a residential school there. There was a center. It's still there. Eh? Palm makers. Yeah. There was a residential school there, and they told me then, that time, we're talking now 1970 something, that there were graveyards where children were buried, and a lot of children had been raped, and that there were problems at the residential school, often with priests, different people, and children would, the parents wouldn't even know how they died or what happened. We know that. We know that it has been like that all these years. But in those days, when you talk about that, it's, these Indians are always complaining. Now people don't have that reaction. They're curious, they want to hear, and they don't like all those injustices. That's the difference.
Well, thank you very much. Natalie, would you like to...
Well, I wanted to thank you. Thank you on our behalf to have been here. I think it's just a way for us to honor an incredible body of work that you've done, and to share it with you tonight was just will be really something that we will all remember. Merci beaucoup. Thank you, Miigwech, and thank you, Peter. This was a movie that effected change. Thank you.